What's up, guys? We are back. New York Muscle Radio, the #1 fitness muscle building podcast ever. It's your host, Anthony Bevilacqua, alongside my co-host, Big Pete-Kacharian. And today we're going to be discussing old school arm training and old school arm training secrets, because let's face it, the people from the golden era, they just did it better. That's it. There's nothing else to say, but they just did it better. I don't know any person nowadays who looks at those guys and then looks at the guys nowadays and says, I think I want to look like Phil Heath. I don't know many people who want to look like Phil Heath.
A lot of people do. I mean, it was never my cup of tea, but yeah, I guess, some people prefer mass monsters over aesthetics, but, I know I got into bodybuilding to look more aesthetic. Obviously those guys were still very big back then. A big misconception is, people say, like people say all the time, Arnold had small legs. But it's all relative. I mean, when you're comparing him to Big Ramy, yeah. But to the average person, those are still massive legs.
Well, wasn't like Lou Ferrigno at one point in that era? Because I know Lou Ferrigno competed in like both eras.
Right, yeah.
But I know even in that era, he was the biggest bodybuilder ever. Wasn't he like 275 or something like that?
He was at one point. This is after pumping iron. He was still competing, and he was kind of like one of the first mass monsters in bodybuilding. Yeah, because he got much bigger. I'm not sure what his exact contest weight was at his biggest, but people look at pumping iron and think Lou was even big back then, but he got even bigger years later.
Well, yeah. So didn't he compete? He was 268.
268
at pumping iron.
Yeah, he must have been almost. He might have even been close to 300 pounds, like in the off season. Competing probably 280 somewhere around there.
Crazy, and that's in like what, the 70s, 80s.
That was his biggest was probably in the 80s. Yeah.
But one of his things, even in pumping iron, he says Arnold had spaghetti arms. So
right.
Lou's arms were bigger than Arnold's.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
So
yeah.
it's crazy to go, like you said, people said that, the mass monster. It was just, it's totally, the drugs is obviously what changed.
Yeah.
And that's what made the physiques look so different. But those guys back then, they just had a totally different look to them. And,
yeah.
And I mean, again, that's how I would want to look. I'm sure, I know that's how you would want to look. That's why we're talking about it. But they did a lot of things special with their arm training. So I wanted to cover that today. I figured that'd be really cool for everyone who on here wants to get an old school arm look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because last episode we also talked about, building the routine and what you should be doing. So if you guys followed that, we really didn't touch on arms too much in that one. So I think this is a perfect complementary episode to that one.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing back then too that we're gonna obviously dive much deeper in is that you mentioned that they did things a little bit different, but really what they did back then, the biggest thing is they didn't shy away from the hard stuff. That's really the big thing. A lot of bodybuilders today look at guys, like I said, they look at Big Ramy, they look at what are these top pro bodybuilders doing? Guys who are already walking around over 300 pounds. They probably aren't going to have to do some of those extremely basic things because they're carrying so much muscle. So when they go to the gym, they're just refining. But then people look at that and they think they built their physique just using these refining movements. And, guys back then, they were building their physique using the basics. It's not like there was a lot of equipment around. It was all the basics. And that's what builds that foundation.
Yeah, and that's something that I always talk about all the time, too. It's like you can't shy away from the basics. So many people train, they go into the gym today, and they use machine after machine after machine. And when you get to a certain point in your career, like, yes, you can do that. Because I know that you're using mostly, like, machine stuff now. But in the beginning, that's not something you would do to build your arms.
Not at all. That's the last thing I would do. Yeah.
So let's talk about Arnold's, the Arnold goes down in history as having all these we look at the Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, having 10,000 exercises you need to do for biceps. When, if you go back to the routine that actually built his arms, it was heavy barbell curls and Zotman curls, which I actually don't like those. I don't think that...
Not a fan of them either.
I don't understand why he would do that out of all the movements. Yeah. But I feel like you could get more out of a dumbbell curl than you would a Zotman curl.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with a basic dumbbell curl. Nothing, but how many guys do you really see go in the gym and grab dumbbells and do dumbbell curls? I'm talking about people that are trying to develop their physique like bodybuilders. They think they need to go in and do all these fancy, crazy exercises with these weird techniques. How many of them do you honestly just see grab a pair of dumbbells, and take a set of curls, near failure, put a lot of intensity to it? It's very rare.
So for me, I get nothing out of barbell curls. I just think my shoulder takes over way too much, and that was one of the things that because I've always wanted to build like a physique, like an old school physique, and barbell curls was the staple. And Arnold says it in the encyclopedia. I was doing 110 pounds for whatever, I think he said 8 reps or whatever. I was doing 110 pounds for 8 reps, And if I worked my way up to 130 for 8 reps, then I knew I was getting bigger biceps.
Right.
But that didn't work like that for me.
Right.
That didn't work like that for me at all. But it wasn't until I think it was actually training with you when I started incorporating more heavy single arm, dumbbell curls, where I actually started noticing development and better, bicep peaks and everything from that. Because for me, when I have the barbell, I'm fixed in, I'm using more of my shoulders for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely individual differences that need to be addressed, especially when you get bigger. If you take somebody that's never walked into the gym before, you put them in the gym, any curl is probably going to get him the similar level of stimulus, So if he's more comfortable with a barbell, give him a barbell. If he's more comfortable with a dumbbell, give him a dumbbell. But as you progress and as you get bigger and as you start developing your physique, you get more strong points, more weak points, and then based on your own individual structure, you might find that, the least efficient way for me to build biceps is using the barbell. I need to go with a dumbbell. So it really all depends at the level that you're at too. And a lot of people make these blanket statements like, oh, a barbell curl is the best exercise. It might be for everyone at a certain point, but as you develop your physique, at a year level, it's a useless exercise, But at one point, it was probably effective for you. Like I said, in the beginning, you might have had a different opinion on a barbell curl because you probably got a decent amount of progress.
Well, I always thought that you had to do it, right?
Yeah.
You had to do it.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things when it comes to old school arm training is just keeping it simple.
Yeah.
I think that most people complicate it. Again, you would know better than me because you've dived into this topic a lot more in depth, but apparently Arnold's original arm routine was something like 8 sets of curls and dumbbell. I heard a bunch of things with his.
Yeah.
I heard that he even did something he would do, I think this was a little later in his career, but he would do heavy barbell curls first, and then he would go into seated barbell curls and then supersetting that with dumbbell curls.
Yeah.
And then he would just do 8 sets of each of those and then be done.
Right. And again, like I said, you also have to look at the times too, because like I said, there wasn't many options. You're basically taking a barbell or a dumbbell, and there's a few different variations you can use with both of those. But you're pretty limited. You could, instead of doing a regular dumbbell curl, you can do an incline dumbbell curl. You can do a preacher curl with a barbell or a dumbbell. That was pretty much it. If you had access to a cable machine, you could use it. But back then, most of their arm training was with barbells and dumbbells.
Yeah.
So there was no need to get fancy because they really didn't have the opportunity to anyway.
And a lot of them back then, actually, for triceps, what did they use? Mostly just regular compound movements to develop the mass of it, and then it was basically just skull crushes and French press. That's basically
the most part. Yeah,
remember.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got your compounds, you have your dips, your close grip bench presses. Yeah, but you really skull crushers, overhead extensions, French presses, all those. Yeah.
So let's go into it, man. So what are some old school arm training secrets then?
Well, the main foundational thing that they all did, besides lift heavy with the basic exercises.
We got the dogs here, guys. They're our co-hosts today, so they're excited about arm training.
No, I think he's a little upset with the conversation. He wants to leave the room.
I'll let him out. Go ahead, continue.
Yeah, I mean, one of the basic foundational things of old school arm training was obviously, those basic movements, heavy weights, to train intensely. There really wasn't any fluff work with the arms back then. They put in a lot of intensity each set. But the main exercise technique that a lot of them utilized was a lot of them would utilize supersets, and a lot of it was antagonistic training for biceps and triceps. And that's something that's definitely not very common today either, because a lot of guys don't train arms that way either. A lot of times, especially today, the arms are really thought of as an afterthought for a lot of people. So they'll just, stack on a couple sets of curls after a back day or something like that. But back then, the entire workout was dedicated to arms, and they would superset biceps and triceps. Some of them would do it from start to finish with no rest. A ton of compounding exercises back to back, a lot of volume, a lot of blood flow. That was the key back then. Yeah,
I mean, so coming from my background, I'll give you a little bit of my background, but for those of you listening who are, new to listening to this, my background is powerlifting. So majority of my physique, I guess, development-wise, was built from those big compound movements, but I never shied away from doing arm training. Earlier in my training years, I did. It was kind of like the afterthought, and I hated it.
Right.
It's I hate doing biceps. I never really felt it. I'm I hate this. This is annoying. So I kind of put it on the back burner for so long, and it's very easy to do that because, especially I think as a kid growing up, it was okay, I want to get my chest bigger.
Right.
So that was the big thing that I was always trying to do is get my chest bigger and improve my bench and get stronger and blah, blah, blah. So of course, biceps and triceps are going to always take a back seat to that because that's what's important. But over my years, the best way to accomplish this is, like you said, by having an arm day, throwing that in there, and utilizing that. And we talked about that in the last episode, where you would do like basically an upper body day, and then you would do an arm day, and then you would do a leg day, and that would cover everything. And that's like probably the best way to do it, where you would still get that old school arm building, routine down. Definitely think that's the best. So again, if you wanted to do something like that, utilizing the strength program that I put out, if your goal was to get stronger and build arms, then you would do that, encompassing with that.
Yeah, and again, it all comes down to priorities. So, if arms are a priority, that's something that you want to be doing. Some people today don't necessarily want to build bigger arms, and that's fine. And if that's the case, then yeah, having an additional arm.
I don't know about that, man. I mean, who doesn't want bigger arms?
I'll give you an example. So, like in my case, I'm still focused on balancing out my physique. I'm not assuming that I could add another 10, 20 pounds of muscle to my frame, but I have to work with what I have now and just refine it. So based on my own individual weaknesses and strengths, my arms have always grown faster. They've always overpowered a lot of my other upper body muscles. So I do train them almost as an afterthought now, because if I were to prioritize them, I'd be taking away from those other muscle groups. If I dedicate a whole day to arm training now, that's one day less a week that I have to dedicate to something like my chest or my back that I really am trying to focus on. So my training is kind of flip-flop now, and I say, okay, based on my own physique, arm training definitely needs to be prioritized much less than something like chest or back or even legs. So to dedicate an entire day to them would really be inefficient for my entire program structure. So in my case, I do train them as an afterthought now just to maintain them. But if I was focusing on, okay, I just want to do a pure arm mass gain phase, I'd easily be training them 2 or 3 times a week, probably on their own days.
So one of the things that you mentioned in there was guys who trained consistently back-to-back bicep, tricep, the whole workout. And so that was Serge Nubret. He's known for training very, very high volume and doing it consistently like that. So one of the things that I like about that routine, because I've tried it, is, and again, you could correct me if I'm wrong, from what I understand, he did bicep workout A, tricep workout A, then right after that bicep workout B, tricep workout B, and then starts back again at the top.
Well, yeah, that's one way to do it too. What he actually would do is, that's a little bit similar to something like Larry Scott would do something like that. He would pair 2 bicep exercises and 2 tricep exercises. Serge Nubret, when he would train, he would basically pick 2 exercises, 1 bicep, 1 tricep, and he would do about 6 to 8 sets of each of them back to back with no rest. So you got bicep A, tricep A, bicep A, tricep A, till he runs through about 6 to 8 sets. Then he completely rested, and then he would do another pair of exercises. So we're talking about, 8, 16 sets in one long back-to-back set, rest, and then repeat it again. And, something like that with 0 rest time, it sounds like a ton of sets, it is, but it's only going to take you about 25, 30 minutes probably to get from start to finish of the entire workout. But that's blood pumping that entire session, which is something that you don't see anybody do today.
Yeah, no, you're never going to see that. But I've tried the thing that Larry Scott was doing, where it's like, you go from one bicep right to the next tricep, right to another bicep. And initially you're like, oh, I'm going to be weaker on the second bicep. But whenever you do triceps in the middle of that, the bicep is always resting and vice versa. So it is a good way to save time and still have that, old school kind of look and feel to your workout.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a time saver. That's one thing with these types of workouts. It's, because a lot of times people say, well, he did 30 sets in the gym. Yeah, but if you're doing it back to back, it's not going to be much longer than a traditional workout where, let's say, you're doing 12 or 15 sets, but you're resting 2 to 3 minutes. So, if you don't have time constraints and you don't want to use supersets, that's fine. But in most cases, if you're training with that much volume, you almost have to use supersets, or else you're going to be in the gym forever. And, there's something to be said about using the supersets to make it more efficient, because if you're resting that long in between sets and, you start your bicep workout and an hour and a half later, you're still on biceps, where's your energy an hour and a half later from where it was when you started? If it's negatively impacting it, you might actually get a better training session by squeezing it in together. And it depends. It depends on your own schedule, your own routine. There's a time and place to train with longer rest periods, time and place to train with shorter rest periods.
Yeah, and I think one of the major things that just makes a routine more old school is just keeping it basic.
Absolutely.
I don't think that you need to do thousands, and we talked about this before, but I don't think you need to be doing thousands of exercises for biceps. You pick the handful that you really feel and just keep milking them. That's what Arnold did. That's what Larry Scott did. That's what all these guys did. I mean, Larry Scott's routine was what? I think he used regular, I could be wrong, I don't remember the first exercise, but I know it was definitely spider curls, and I know it was definitely preacher curls. What was the first one? Was it regular barbell curls?
He would do what he would call Scott curls, which is basically a preacher curl bench with the flat side. So he would usually do, he would use a barbell and then a dumbbell as a superset. That was kind of his first exercise, yeah. And then, triceps, it was basically a French press, and I believe he would do like a modified push down where he would actually, it was more like a skull crusher push down with a cable. It's all basic stuff, like I said. Yeah, and they picked the exercises that they connected with, and then they just train those with enough intensity and enough volume to get the arms to grow. And it wasn't like, oh, every single week I'm going to change something. I'm going to use a cable this week. Next week I'm going to use a band. That's a lot of things people do today is they make the training complicated. It wasn't complicated back then. It was hard work and it was consistency.
One of my favorite exercises that I got from Larry Scott that I love, I actually really think it's a really, really beneficial movement, is preacher curls with 2 dumbbells.
Yeah, it's a great
the only pain in the butt part is that you have to literally pick the dumbbells up and get them in position. Yeah. That's the most annoying part. But it by far works better than any barbell, any cable. Really, really good movement. I really like that one a lot.
Yeah, the preacher bench, Scott bench, depending which way you want to use it, there's pros and cons to using each side of the bench. When I say each side of the bench, because some benches actually have a flat side that you can use. A lot of people don't realize that when you go in the gym, and they just use the one angle for the preacher bench. I think they're both great. I used to love doing both of them in one workout actually, but the preacher bench is such an underrated piece of equipment in the gym, like a good preacher bench.
Well, that was one of the things when Arnold came to this country. That was one of the first exercises that he started implementing into his biceps, and he swore by it after that. Yep. I wonder if he would have had him as like a kid, if he would have started with those. He probably definitely wouldn't have been doing Zotman curls.
No, he probably would have realized quickly, the Zotman curls, I'm not getting as much out of those curls. But, my biggest thing, and I tell people this all the time, is the best exercises you can use for any body part are ones that allow a lot of stabilization, allow you to really lock in and only use that target muscle. Any movement where you can engage other muscles or you're not as stable, they still might be good mass builders for, just general size to the entire body, but for isolating that one muscle, it's a less efficient way to do it. So something like a preacher bench solves the problem of taking a barbell curl and using your shoulders, using your back, using your hips, using momentum. When you're locked into a preacher bench, it's almost impossible to use other muscles besides your biceps.
I really love a spider curl. That's like one of my favorite movements. Yeah. Another way to like lock everything in. You mentioned stabilization. That's the first thing I thought of instantly. Like I feel that, and our co-host is back in the room. I feel those way more than anything else because it's just like you said, you're just locked in.
Yeah, what I like about a spider curl is you're basically taking a standard barbell curl, but you're taking your hips and your shoulders out of the equation. Yeah. So it's a very similar movement. When you lean forward like that too, the peak contraction at the top is a little bit harder, so you're getting a little more out of the top of the movement. You're getting a little bit less out of the bottom. But the main thing that you are getting is the only thing that's really working is the biceps.
I don't want to make this all about biceps. That's what we've really been talking. Let's talk triceps now. I mean, there's 2 schools of thought. You have your big compound movements. You just got to do those. And then, I'm going to say right now, that's BS. I never did anything for me. It never worked. I have a really strong bench. I have a really, good overhead press. So that carried 0 over to development-wise for the triceps. So what are the best old school tricep building? What are your top 3 old school tricep go-to mass builders?
Top 3, I would say French press, overhead dumbbell extension, and tricep press down. Very, very basic exercises. Like I said, in some cases, guys didn't even have access to cable machines, but if they did, there's one thing, a lot of exercises I always say, the basic free weight version is going to be the best, and then machine work is going to be, secondary. But a press down is literally something you really can't mimic without a cable machine. So if you have access to it, it's definitely going to be one of my top choices. And all my arm training programs that I put together for myself, for anybody else in any of my programs, we're all going to incorporate some type of press down variation because it's something you really can't duplicate with free weights. Those other exercises are great. You can build great arms if you just have barbells and dumbbells. But if you do have access to a cable, I would definitely put a tricep press down in there.
Yeah, for me, French presses are really good. I love doing those. I think those are a really, really good movement too. But nothing blows up my triceps like skull crushers.
Yeah.
And I love to do them behind my head. Like I try to get really, really back there, getting a good stretch and then coming up. And for me, most people say you can't like come over the chest. I have to do that full pullover version to get a lot out of my triceps. but like instantly, I haven't done them in a while. I took a little bit of a break from it. I was having some like shoulder pain when I was doing them, so I took a little bit of a break. So I was doing them the other day light, and the pump that I got in my triceps, I'm like, it's crazy. It's like, and I'm not even using a lot of weight.
No, you don't. I mean, definitely there's a benefit to going heavy on those movements. Certain exercises work very well for going heavy, and some of them don't. You can load up a lot of weight on those and get some of the benefits of lower rep range training for the triceps. But that exercise in general, you know, there's a few exercises that really give you a great tricep pump, and that's one of them for sure.
And one of the movements too for triceps, and no one really talks about this, that gives you that hang from the front. So when you flex, you have like that big meaty part on the bottom, is going to be your overhead.
Yeah,
for sure. No one talks about that, but doing an overhead really heavy is going to hit that super hard. And also, like, there's like a little cheat code to that, the one with the cable, when you kind of, I can't really do it because my mic's in the way, but when you kind of lean forward, it's the same motion, but you're kind of leaning forward from the cable. That one is just very hard to get in position, but that's also another really good one to really work that area. But those two types of movements, and again, like you said, that is like a staple old school movement that those guys did.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and there's really, you know, I broke this down in a video I did. There's really, when you're talking about just isolation movements, and a lot of times people get confused and they just assume, okay, this is an arm exercise, this is a tricep exercise, or this is not. You know, but then when you dig deeper into any body part, you really have a few different movement patterns that you can do for that one muscle group. So if you're doing an isolation movement for a tricep, there's really about 3 of them. You know, you're doing an overhead extension where the elbows are up and you're lifting the weight above you. You're doing something like a skull crusher where the elbows are out in front of you, you're pressing the weight out in front of you, and then you press down, elbows are down, pressing down. And if you want to complete tricep development, you really should be incorporating all 3 of those movement patterns, you know? And if you have one area of the tricep that needs more work, you might want to dedicate more work to one of those movement patterns and less to the others. But again, if we're talking about full development, you really want to attack all 3 of those.
The funny thing is, every other movement that there is just a variation of those 3 areas.
Exactly.
So like some people, and even Arnold swore by kickbacks at one point. He would do kickbacks.
Yeah.
That's a push down.
Exactly.
Essentially what that is, just in a different position.
Yeah.
I happen to feel a kickback a lot in my triceps, but there's 0 for development.
Yeah. I never really connected with it myself, to be honest.
I don't know. I could do them and I feel it a lot, but I never get anything out of it.
One of those exercises that people either connect with at 100 or 100% or not at all.
I think with dumbbells it's almost pointless because there's really no, like the pull is,
only at the top.
The pull is not there. You need to use a cable.
You can do them with a cable.
But then you might as well, then at that point you might as well just do a push and press down.
Exactly.
So it's the same thing. Although it does take the shoulder out of the equation a little bit more because you're in that little bit of a different position. But again, that's another really good just variation. But again, like you said, overhead, you know, in front, like the skull crusher, and then to the side of the body. And then those are the 3 basic staples. I'll never forget, like the first time, like, you know, when I first started working out, it's like French press, and I would do them like behind. Like I always love those.
Yeah. I mean,
I got away from them for a while because I just like they're very bad on the elbow.
I was gonna
elbow.
say some of these exercises, which are great for development, they're also a very high risk for aches and pains and even some injuries. So, you know, you can't abuse them either is another thing. You know, especially like I said, when you get stronger, you know, you're talking about that you have a very strong bench press and overhead press. You can likely, you know, use a ton of weight on it. You know, skull crushers, French presses, any type of dumbbell, barbell, tricep extension, even overhead dumbbells. You know, that was one of my favorite exercises because again, it stretches the triceps so much and it's that overhead variation. But when you get to the point where you're using, you know, 120, 130, even up to 150 pound dumbbells, your risk of injury gets much more significantly higher.
That's why I love the dumbbell version of that exercise, but I hate it because it's so annoying to get the dumbbell in position.
Yeah.
It's like it becomes, after a while, it's like, okay, I can't even do this movement because it's more annoying to get the dumbbell. I'm more tired from getting the dumbbell into position than actually doing the movement itself. If I had someone who would just here's the dumbbell, take it away, then yes. But other than that, you're just better off. Like even with skull crushes, and I go back and forth with this all the time. I love doing skull crushes. I absolutely hate getting the bar into position. It's so annoying and there's no way around it.
And that's, you know, again, when you start to tailor things as you become more advanced. So in the beginning, you know, skull crusher would be like one of my first exercises. I want to train it fresh. I want to use as much weight on it. It's my main mass builder. Now, because of the amount of weight I have to use and then getting it in position becomes more difficult, and plus the injury risk on my elbows and things like that, the wear and tear because it's so much weight, it makes more sense for me now. Place that all the way at the end of the workout. I'll use lighter weights because I'm already pre-fatigued from whatever other exercises I use. And you know, I can still get the benefits from it without having to go super heavy on it. You know, whereas early on it would be almost pointless to put that at the end of the workout because, you know, I'm still building my strength, I'm still building that foundation. I would want to do that first while I was fresh.
Yeah. So let's put together an old school arm training routine for someone now so that they can stay injury free and be able to keep progressing and grow big arms. So first place I would look at would be, I'd always, again for me, I would always want to start with biceps. I just think it's more like, I think that one of the key things with arms also is getting like that mind muscle connection. So that's why I think starting with biceps first, because you can actually see what's going on, you could squeeze it, you could feel what's going on. That'll help you to like kind of warm up the movements for the day. And I personally, whenever I do arms, I love to do bicep right into a tricep. That superset for having blood in both portions of the arm, I think is very, very beneficial. What about you? Have you ever, obviously you've done that before, but do you prefer that, or do you prefer just doing just biceps and then just triceps?
I always prefer, if I ever pair body parts in a session and if they work synergistically like biceps and triceps do, I would always want to alternate them so that one doesn't suffer. Because if you train biceps first for the entire workout, if it's an arm workout, you want equal development to your biceps and triceps. If you train all bicep first and then you start your tricep workout after you finish biceps, like I said, you're going to be a little bit more tired. You're not going to drain yourself completely. It's not like you're training legs and then going to train triceps. But your intensity might be a little bit lower, your focus might be a little bit off from when you first came in fresh. I would like to pair them together just so they get an equal amount of work throughout the entire session. So if that was the focus, absolutely I would alternate them back and forth.
Yeah. So starting with biceps, so I would say you definitely need a heavy compound movement.
Yeah.
So you definitely need something in there that you're able to progress with. So again, going back to what we said earlier, what do you feel more? That would either be a barbell curl or a seated dumbbell curl. I think that those are really good. You're literally just sitting, I can't speak today, and you're just curling one arm at a time. And I've done it where it's like, okay, you do one arm and then you go and you do the other arm. You can do it either way. It just goes to what you prefer.
Yeah, and either of those exercises are going to get you a similar level of development, especially as that first, mass building exercise. And it's just going to kind of come down to preference, what your body structure is better suited for, what you feel more comfortable with, what you could just connect with better. Because, a lot of these exercises, like you mentioned, they're pretty much just variations. Dumbbell curls have a little added benefit of allowing you to pronate and supinate and things like that. But at the end of the day, if we're just talking about stimulation to that muscle group, you're going to get a very similar level of development using either of these exercises.
And then I would go right into, I like to start with like a push down of some sort, just to warm up the elbow. Mm-hmm. Again, a lot of variations you can do to it that would fit your body. So you could do a rope, which I prefer to start with the rope. I think that warms up the elbow the best. You could do a one arm. You could do a reverse one arm, which is another one of my favorite movements that I like to do.
I like the V-bar personally, but you can do any attachment, like I said, that you connect with. They're all going to offer a similar level of stimulation to what you're trying to accomplish with that movement.
Yeah, so that would be your first pairing. I think 3 pairings is good.
As a base, absolutely.
Yeah, as a base.
That's going to cover everything.
Yeah. So the second movement that I would do for biceps, again, it just depends on like what part of the bicep that you're trying to do. I always love an incline curl. I think that incline curls are and should be a staple to everybody's routine. It's going to really develop that outer head of the bicep, that head that you can see. So if you're genetically like I am, I've always had skinnier, thinner arms. That's one of the exercises that really helps to kind of push the biceps like wider, make them kind of wider. So I would always go into an incline, and then I would always superset that with skull crushers. I think skull crushers are a perfect movement secondary in that case. The elbow's nice and warm, and again, you're going to get good long head development from your triceps. And again, doing what I said, I think is the best way to do it. Really getting a good stretch back and then coming all the way up and getting a good squeeze in the tricep. Now, some people will argue and say you have to keep your elbows back behind your head, go down, come up. If you feel that, you can do that. But for me, I have to come all the way up to do that. So again, everyone's a little bit different, but find that movement that works for you. So I think that should be the best second pairing that you should be doing.
I think that's a great way to do it, because you covered your bicep mass building exercise first, then you're doing your secondary. I would call that kind of like an intermediate exercise, because you still have some of the benefits of like a basic mass building exercise. Incline dumbbell curls could arguably be a basic mass. I think that incline dumbbell curls are a great secondary exercise because you're getting some of the benefits as a mass building exercise, but you're focusing a bit more on the stretch with that exercise. So once you're on that incline position, you're going to be getting heavy stimulation because you can use a lot of weight on an incline dumbbell curl, but you're going to be getting much more of that stretch. Something like that usually works much better after you have a lot of blood in the muscles. So using an exercise to get a good pump first, then moving on to that's a great way to do it. Same thing with the skull crushers secondary. Once you have a lot of blood in the triceps, the elbows are going to be feeling good from those press downs. You're not going to be hammering them with a ton of weight on the press downs. It's not a harsh movement. Now you can go into that mass building movement, that skull crusher. And, you can load up the weight on there too. Usually by that point, your elbows are going to be feeling much better than if you started with that exercise fresh. So, a lot of this is all about putting the exercises in the right orders as well. Some people might say, oh, I can't do skull crushers because they kill my elbows. Are you only doing them first in your workout? They might be perfect if you already do one exercise before them and get blood in the muscles. So a lot of it is exercise pairings and orders as well.
So, and I want to touch on this. So most people would say now at this point, okay, I'm doing incline curls. And again, there's a certain way to do incline curls too. I've seen people do them horribly wrong. You need to be in a position where your arms are going to be behind you, but you're also comfortable. One of the things with incline curls is if you're too far back, your feet are going to be below you and you're not going to have enough stability like you mentioned before. Mm-hmm. So for me, I always like to put a bench, or I'll put myself in front of the dumbbell rack. I'll prop my feet up on the dumbbell rack or on the bench in front of me, so this way I have stability to get back and really stretch it. But that's an afterthought. One of the things that someone's going to say is, well, to save time, can I do skull crushers on an incline? And I absolutely think that those are completely useless. You're not getting enough range of motion. There's not enough stretch to go back to really hit that long head of the tricep, which is the most medius part of the tricep. So you need to be doing it on the flat or a decline. Decline's actually a really good movement too, but you definitely need to be on a flat or decline for those triceps. And again, like I said, really getting a good stretch back.
Yeah,
I don't think you should do the incline.
Yeah, the incline, you're kind of trying to combine two different exercises in one, but you're not getting the full benefits of either.
Exactly. Agreed 100%. All right, let's go into our third pairing. So our third pairing, and for me, I think the third exercise might be a little bit different for you. So for biceps, at this point, I've pumped a lot. I've done my heavy mass building movement for biceps at this point. I did a heavy dumbbell curl or a barbell curl, really stimulated the bicep. Then I got a heavy stretching movement in there. So the next thing that I would do in this case is really making sure I get a good stretch in the bottom and a really good peak contraction. So I would go right into 2-arm dumbbell curls. Use 2 dumbbells on a preacher curl. Did I say preacher curl? I don't know what so I didn't get a lot of sleep last night, guys. So anyway, so I would do 2-arm, 2 dumbbell preacher curl. I think that that's the best at this point. Again, really focusing on the top and holding that peak contraction on top and really getting a good squeeze. Those kill. You're not going to be able to use a lot of weight with those. Yeah. And at this point, then I would superset that with some type of a French press. Again, like I said, I prefer using dumbbells, but once you get to the point where those dumbbells are super, super heavy, they get really annoying to lug around. The next best thing you could do is, again, like I said, either the cable one, where you're kind of like leaning forward, which again is also really annoying, and you have to use your core a lot for that one. Yeah. But other than that, easy curl bar, overhead, French press, definitely as the third exercise. Again, elbows are nice and warm. You did another mass building movement before with skull crushers, so I think that's the perfect place to put that. You can't really put skull crushers or French press first in your routine just for your elbow health.
No, I wouldn't recommend it. Yeah. And yeah, I agree 100%. I think that, when you've already taken over all those, whenever you've ever covered all those variables, you've trained heavy already, you got a good stretch. Really, the last thing you want to focus on to make sure you are covering all ends is you want to make sure you get a really good peak contraction on the last movement. You want to get as much blood flowing into the muscle as possible. Now, you should have a lot already, but you're kind of just topping it off, making sure that you've got full pump for that workout. And any exercise can really fit well in here that you can focus on and you can really isolate that muscle. So you're not going to be putting mass building exercises here in that last slot. You could even go strictly with cables or things like that. Very good isolation moves, like you said, using a preacher curl, something that's going to allow you to really focus on just that muscle. So what I like to do at the end usually here is I like to even go as far as a very basic cable curl or something like that, or even a one-arm cable curl. Like you said, you can do what you do with a cable as well if you want to really focus on isolating it. You're going to get a little bit of a different benefit because of the angle of the cable versus the dumbbell. But at the end of the day, the thing you're focusing on the most right now is getting a really good squeeze and peak contraction of that muscle. And these movements are going to be done with lighter weights at this point. So you can get pretty creative. You don't have to here with this one, but you want to focus on whatever movement that you're able to connect with the best for that muscle group.
And one of the things, the best piece of advice I've ever gotten from Pete Kacharian on bicep development. Go ahead, tell him.
What, about the squat?
Yeah.
Well, I always said, the best thing that you can do to develop your biceps is treat your curls the same way you treat your squats. Everyone looks at the bicep as an afterthought. Squats, they're going in, they're saying, I'm 100% locked in today. You know, they get nervous, they get anxiety about it. You know, they mentally prepare before they even leave the house. I got a heavy squat day. You know, when was the last time you heard somebody say, I got a really hard bicep workout to get to? But you know what, if you put that in your mind and then you go in the gym and you treat it the same way you treat your squats, you know, big things are going to happen.
Yeah, guys, Pete's not even joking, because that's like the only movements in the gym that he sweats.
Yeah,
like he'll do heavy squats, heavy deadlifts, heavy bench press, not break a sweat. One set of heavy curls, drenched.
There's a lot to be said. I mean, we could probably do a whole podcast episode on it, but there's a lot to be said about your mental approach to training and to a specific exercise. You know, a lot of the body parts that people don't develop is just because mentally they're just not there to develop that body part. They say, oh, I hate training arms, so I'm going to do a couple sets of curls and I'm going to leave. But if people go in and they just, like I said, you treat your whole year, it's like your pre-workout routine is, okay, you know, today I'm going to the gym, I'm training biceps, you know, this is the exercises I'm going to do. I'm going to really, you know, focus 100% on beating my best and my previous best. And a lot of people don't treat the arms that way too. You know, like you said earlier, you know, Arnold said, okay, if I'm training with barbell curls with 100 pounds and I get them up to 120, I know my biceps are going to get bigger, they're going to get stronger. You know, that might not be the case if your form is getting poorer as you do that. But if you mentally say, okay, listen, I'm going to progress with arms. You know, I'm going to get stronger. I'm going to use more weight. I'm going to do more reps. You're gonna make progress, and people don't really treat it like that. They just say, okay, I'm just gonna go and I'm just gonna feel the bicep today. You do that forever and nothing happens, you know. Yeah. But if you mentally treat it like, okay, I have to progress with biceps the same way I have to progress with my squats, you're gonna make improvements.
Yeah, it's a good Peteism for everyone there. But one of the other things too that I wanted to touch on before we wrap this up, when I was coming up, I was really skinny. That was like my whole thing. I was really skinny. I was so embarrassed. I always have to wear 2 shirts because I hated the way I looked because I was like rail skinny. So for me, when I first started, I wanted to bring up everything. I just wanted to gain muscle. And everything else for me grows rather quickly. My arms just always kind of lag behind. So for me, I always needed extra volume. But I always had other goals in mind. Like for me, like, okay, yeah, I want to grow my arms. But I also wanted to get stronger. As I started competing in powerlifting, that became more priority. But I never let the arm training step aside. Maybe in the beginning I did, but like once I realized, okay, I can have this goal and this goal. So my point is that if you are trying to bring up other body parts or you are trying to get stronger in your lifts or compete in powerlifting, you can do, this is one of the things where you can actually do both. You can actually do both. You can get stronger because the overlap from both is not going to interfere with each other. So you can do, like I said, the routine that we built on the last episode, you know, your heavy upper pushing day right before that, and then do arms at some point later in the week or the next day or whatever, and you can train triceps super heavy and it will not affect your bench. Some people say, oh, my triceps are still sore and when I bench. Trust me, you can do it. You just have to keep working through it and get used to that stimulus, but you can actually do both. And take it from somebody who has done both. I've successfully grown my arms and gotten stronger at the same time. So it can be done. It's just all with proper programming. This is why we put together the routines that we put together. So, you know, you can have 2 goals with this. I know you're going to probably argue with me because you don't believe in that. But take it from someone who has done it. You can actually do both.
Yeah. I mean, my stance on goal setting with, you know, and it comes to anything, but we're talking specifically on building muscle and bodybuilding specifically, but I always say that, you know, if you want to prioritize one thing, you need to make that the main focus. That doesn't mean you can't have other goals, though. You just have to only have a goal you have to have goals that complement each other. So if you want to have 2 things you focus on, like you said, if you want to focus on getting stronger and you want bigger arms, you can do that because they complement each other. You know, if you're getting stronger, it's going to help you build more muscle to your arms because now you can lift more weight on your French presses, your overhead extensions, tricep extensions, all those things. But now if you have 2 goals that do not complement each other, they conflict, you're going to not get better at either one of them at the same time. So if you're saying,
if I want to gain muscle and lose fat at the same time?
Exactly. You know, but now if you said, listen, I want to gain muscle and I want to gain strength, they complement each other. They might not necessarily be required for one another. You know, you might not necessarily need to get stronger to build a ton of muscle. If you're already strong, you have a great foundation, you might need to focus specifically on bodybuilding work. But if your goal is, okay, I also want to increase my bench and I want to add 2 inches to my arms, you can do those at the same time. So the real thing is, you know, you want to have one main goal, one secondary goal, but you want to also make sure that they complement each other. You know, and if you can do that, you're fine.
Well said, Pete. All right, guys, so that's the arm training routine. That's basically the basic old school. If you're looking to get arms like Arnold, like Lou Ferrigno, Larry Scott, all those guys, you need to be doing what we just laid out for you guys right there. So again, there's nothing else more than that. Follow that. We didn't even talk about reps or sets or anything. And again, I think that goes back to the last podcast. We kind of covered that.
That shows, yeah. You know, people focus on that stuff. You know, they talk about, you know, you've heard the phrase before. You know, you're minoring in the major, you're majoring in the minors. You know, if you're so worried about rep ranges, sets, and things like that, you're missing the big picture. You know, did you do the proper exercises? Did you perform them with good technique? Are you getting the pump? You know, are you making progress? You know, at the end of the day, I just did a video on this too. It's actually going out today. The main thing you want to focus on as far as measuring things is your progress. You know, people always ask me, you know, I'm doing 10 sets. Is it enough? Well, what's your progress say? Are you getting stronger? Your arms getting bigger? If they are, yeah, it's enough. Why would you do more? You know, why would you do less? So if you're focusing on the right exercises, the right technique, the right execution, and you're getting better, you're doing the right amount.
All right, guys. So we're going to end off on another Peteism. That's the second podcast in a row we ended off on the Peteisms there. But all right, guys, make sure you follow us on Instagram at ABFitness, at Jacked. Go to Get Stronger Now to get stronger. Old school muscle build, old school
massgain.com.
Oh, there you go. Oh, you bought the domain.
Yeah, I said.
Look at you. There you go.
Finally,
Finally, Mr. Technology. Can't even buy a domain and hook it to his own program he bought. All right, guys. Pete and Anthony, New York Muscle Radio, and we're out.